Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Yourself?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do this on Sunday night. It's an honor to be able to talk to you about the promotion of the brand new Haken album, Affinity, which is coming out on Friday. I've gotten the chance to listen to it about 4 or 5 times, as I just got the promo this past week, and I gotta say that you guys are definitely on the top of your game right now.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Thanks very much.
Oh, absolutely, no problem. So, what went into the process for writing for Affinity?
Well, it was quite a long and drawn-out process. I can't remember exactly when we started writing it, but it would have been, some of the material was being sort of shared between us, shared around the band, maybe around, I don't know, let me think, sort of towards the end of 2014. And it was very much quite a collaborative effort compared to our sort of previous albums and the previous way we've written. I think it's just been a sort of thing that's kind of been a long time coming, because in the early days it was mostly Richard, one of our guitarists, who wrote the sort of the foundations of the music, and then he'd sort of send it to us, and we'd maybe rearrange it, add sections, take away lots of stuff, rework it entirely. But Richard would usually come up with sort of musical foundations of the album. Whereas with this album in particular, we did it a little bit with The Mountain, but we did it far more so on this album. And it was more a case of maybe me contributing a couple of songs, Charlie contributing a couple of songs, everyone sort of contributing a song or a large chunk of a song to some extent, rather than it being sort of one person and then us sort of all sort of getting into the mix once most of the music was written. So yeah, it's a very collaborative process, I think, and it was also quite an online and computer sort of based process as well, because in the past we've spent a lot of time in a room together writing, whereas on this album we perhaps didn't do that as much as we have done in the past. It was far more sort of writing kind of individually in our own spaces and sending ideas via email and Dropbox, and just constantly sharing ideas online, basically. So yeah, that's kind of a rough idea of the writing process, I think.
Oh, very cool. It's very cool to see how it can be done that way in 2016, where you don't even necessarily need to be in the same room to be able to write an album together.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a real advantage having the internet, and it's essential now, given that we're pretty much like a transatlantic band, because 2 of the guys live over in America. One in Indiana and the other in Mexico City. So, and then it was originally a London-based band, but now the kind of members have sort of spread out a little bit, and it makes it kind of very difficult to meet up and write together, except for when we've got maybe patches of touring or that sort of thing.
Say, going back to the previous 3 albums, what would you say it felt writing for Affinity as compared to the other albums? I mean, did it still feel as fresh and fun to you, just sending in the songs and then hearing what the other guys were sending to you, or do you prefer working in the same room together?
I think a mixture, to be honest. We're all different. Some of us kind of maybe prefer and kind of thrive off being in the same room as each other, and some of us maybe prefer. Speaking for myself, I'm definitely one to kind of like my own space to a certain extent. When I've got an idea in the jam room and I can't quite articulate it, I like to just say to the guys, look, I've got this idea for this section. I can waste a bunch of time trying to communicate it to you now, or I'll just once we're done jamming together, I'll put it together and I'll send you guys what I'm talking about. But it's not always the case. Sometimes things are born of just being together and playing live. So for me, it's a bit of a mixture. Sometimes I prefer to just say, okay, I'd be much better if I just come up with this by myself. Or sometimes it's, come on, guys, let's, if we're having maybe trouble, if we're having like a creative block or something, we're just struggling with a particular section, then being together in the same room really helps us come up with a result, because just having one person work on something individually isn't always, can tend to be nowhere near as productive as having 6 people contributing. But then again, having too many people, it's a case of too many cooks. So it really depends on what stage of a song or the album we're on.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense because it just like you said, it depends on the passage. It depends on a particular song, a part of the song where sometimes the individual who's writing it will come up with the best idea, and sometimes the other members of the band might have an even better idea for that song as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think as well, sometimes if one of us has an idea and can't get it across, the others are very eager to hear that idea regardless, so that it can get a bit too sort of it can sometimes get a bit pressurizing. There were a couple of instances writing this album where I might have had certain things going on in my head, and I just couldn't get it out, and I was just getting hounded by the guys. Come on, what do you mean that bit? Like, show us what you mean. And it takes a while when you've got. Sometimes it's really easy to translate things in your head and ideas, and sometimes it's just not. Sometimes you never get it out really. That's one of the real downsides of songwriting and making music is sort of as much work and time as you put into it. So much of the time you can never truly translate your ideas. So that's kind of what helps really, being in a band with 6 guys who are all really passionate about sort of songwriting and making the best music we can, because we try and squeeze it out of each other.
Yeah, I mean that's the amazing thing to me about Affinity, is because it does feel like that you guys were in a room together writing the whole album together. It doesn't feel like that you guys were still all over the globe and just sending in the material to each other and then fine-tuning it until you recorded it. I mean, it feels like you guys were in the studio writing it together, and I think that shows a lot of how tight you guys have become over the years.
Yeah, I think it helps that we've done it in a more live way in the past, and obviously we've done a lot more touring this year than in the past year than we've ever done in previous years. A lot more shows every year. We're doing more shows, so we're so used to playing together now. We kind of know what kind of ideas each other brings to the table. With Connor, because Connor's a new addition, so having him has kind of brought this new element to our sound, but. I see what you mean. I mean, there are certain passages where we told ourselves, look, we simply can't write this music, this particular song or this particular section until we're together in a room and we jam it through, because it's just not going to feel natural. But a lot of the other stuff we kind of know maybe from writing other songs in the past, similar sort of injecting a sort of similar energy and writing it in a particular way, orchestrating it in a certain way. We sort of already have a good idea in our heads of how it's going to sort of turn out as a sort of final product, and also probably more importantly how we're going to play this stuff live, because that's something we always consider when we're writing music and we're writing vocal parts and backing vocal parts, is are we going to be able to execute this stuff live, because we don't want to have to be putting stuff on backing tracks. But it's kind of handy that there's 6 of us, I suppose. If there were less of us, then it's more difficult to achieve that really big sound. So having 6 of us and sort of the changeability between guitar and keyboards, Richard plays guitars and keyboards, and then we've got another guitarist and another keyboardist. So we've got a lot of potential for lots of different lines going on at once. Just making sure we can do that realistically is quite important to us.
Oh, very much so. And I know that means a lot to me as a fan. I like being able to hear what I hear on a record replicated live. I mean, obviously there's parts of the songs that are meant to be played through a laptop or a PA system or whatever the situation is, but the more real the band can sound live, the more it feels live to everyone that's in the crowd as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. We've always been that sort of band, and we don't want to have to rely on rely on any kind of sounds other than the sounds that we're making there and then. So yeah.
Oh, very much so. And of course, you brought up how Connor is the newest member to Haken. What would you say that he's contributed most to the Affinity songwriting process?
Well, Connor's got a kind of wealth of new and different influences that perhaps we haven't sort of considered in the past. Different genres. He's before he joined the band, he was doing a jazz degree mostly on the double bass, and he wasn't necessarily hugely into metal. I think he probably was when he was younger, but he'd kind of gone away from all that, and he's much more into kind of indie and sort of ambient and electronic music. So I mean that kind of stuff we were kind of getting into anyway, so it kind of it's kind of nice to have Connor join the band and maybe sort of introduce us to a lot of new bands and a lot of new sounds. So there's that, and there's also his playing. I think he's a very different player to Tom. Tom was a very sort of extrovert bass player, I would say. He was very, very keen to have his sort of musical voice heard in our music, which is great because we've got a ton of really cool and quite soloistic bass lines throughout all of our sort of earlier music up to The Mountain. Because Tom's a kind of, well, I mean, he's first and foremost a guitarist, so he, as a bass player, he almost played it like a guitar, played it very melodically, whereas Connor's very much a more sort of traditional bass player. He tends to keep things more simple, more stripped down, and there were times when we were writing and I had to say, because I'm so used to playing with Tom, hey Connor, what about putting in a fill here or a lick there, you know, give the bass some movement there, would be really nice, I think. And I think that's something Connor wasn't so used to doing in the past, because he's got a very sort of he's got a more traditional way of playing the bass. So I think that may or may not be noticeable on the album. There probably are less sort of soloistic bass moments, but then again, there's plenty of little bass features. I mean, there's one in The Architect. There's an actual solo spot that we kind of thought would be great for Connor to have, and he really took that on well. And it's definitely a different vibe to having Tom on board, but a fantastic addition nonetheless.
Oh, that is fantastic to hear. And I can definitely say, listening through the entire album about 5 or 6 times now, where I've noticed that everyone in the band kind of has more simple moments, more of the technical proggier moments, and again, just overall, it feels like the band has just gotten tighter and tighter over the years, and the songwriting has gotten even tighter over the years, and it definitely just feels like another album where you guys are definitely just, again, on the top of your game.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. Speaking for myself, I'm always trying to make, you know, each performance on a new album much better than the previous one, and it kind of helps, I suppose, that it was about 2 years on this time, and I've had the sort of great experiences of touring with some other bands with incredible drummers and just checking out loads of new music, loads of new drummers, and just I've had more time, I suppose, to work on my instrument as well over the past couple of years, because previously I was actually studying another instrument, and I kind of felt like I was kind of neglecting my drumming. Well, not so much neglecting, but I would have liked more time to practice it and develop my sort of voice, I suppose. And I've had a lot more time to do that between The Mountain and Affinity, which is great, because for me I've managed to hopefully kind of, well, I've tried to push myself in lots of different directions with my playing, and just try and investigate and incorporate sort of beats and sounds and things that perhaps you wouldn't usually hear on like a prog album, and you wouldn't usually hear from me, because I'm sort of writing parts that push me into new territory. So, and I think we're all kind of like that. We all try and do that as much as we can. Just push ourselves technically, and an album's a really good format to do that. If you feel like you really need to do some work on your instrument, write an album. That's probably a good way to try and really develop yourself as an instrumentalist.
Absolutely. So you were talking about how you've been improving even more so between The Mountain and Affinity. What would you say has been the biggest struggle when it comes to you behind the drums between those two albums?
That's a tricky one. I wouldn't say there's one particular struggle. I'd say it's just a whole wealth of things. I've never felt like I feel very confident performing and playing with Haken, but I've never felt very confident as a drummer, sort of in myself. So I feel it's great when I'm playing with Haken, because I've been doing it since I was 17, so almost 10 years, and it's something I can just hide behind, and I can sort of outperform and sort of almost cover up my lack of ability with kind of performance, this performance side of things, perhaps. But there isn't any one thing. It's just a constant sort of search to develop as many things as possible. That's one of the problems with playing the drums, I think, because you are you should be able to play in as many different styles as there are, and it's not necessarily the same with a lot of other instruments. So yeah, I can't sort of put my finger on any one thing, to be honest. Just everything.
Oh yeah. Oh, I totally understand how that goes. I mean, I've been playing almost 20 years myself behind the drums, and it doesn't matter whether I'm writing or playing shows or just playing for my own personal enjoyment. I always find those problem areas where I would like to get better behind, and those areas that I just recently learned how to be able to do and be able to try to perfect those the best that I can, because with the drums there's so many different ways that you can go behind things, whether someone's writing a metal riff and you want to give it a non-metal drum beat, or being able to come up with different styles and genres playing behind the drums, be able to add some new ideas that you wouldn't normally hear behind a song, and with the drums you're able to do that and give it such a great feel behind it.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I mean, I can think of two quite clear examples, at least to me, on Affinity, that are kind of stylistic and technical areas that perhaps I wouldn't have even considered a couple of years ago. And it's partly down to the discovery of particular bands. If you take the song "Laps," for example, which is the third full song on the album, there's a verse section in that song, and to be honest, the whole song kind of was kind of partly inspired by the music of Carnival. Don't know if you know those guys.
Oh, absolutely, great Australia band.
Yeah, and it's Steve Judd, isn't it?
Yep.
Steve Judd's the drummer. And he's just got this great way with just I don't even know what it is, but he just puts down amazing grooves all the time on all of their songs, and half the time they're really, really simple, but they just work. And often they're actually quite complicated, but they're often quite, I guess, tom-based as well. And I suppose I was trying to evoke that sort of sound with that verse in Laps. And it's well, for me at least, it's quite technical and quite syncopated, and quite a sort of jaunty beat. I could have easily just put quite a straight beat over that. I mean, it's in 5, and I don't think the beat that's kind of ended up being on there makes it feel like it's in 5. It makes it feel a lot more jaunty, but hopefully still groovy. And then there's another section towards the end of The Architect. I don't know if you're familiar with a band called Agent Fresco.
I've heard the name, but I'm not entirely sure I've checked them out yet.
Yeah, you should check out Agent Fresco. They're a fantastic Icelandic band, and again, they've got a very, very sort of syncopated, rhythmic-based, but very melodic music. But it can be quite choppy and have quite a sort of electronic, almost glitchiness to it at times, but all the while having this really nice sort of legato, phrased, melodic stuff over the top. And if you take the end of The Architect, it's kind of got that kind of sound to it, I'd say. It's a very sort of epic, free-flowing melody, and then underneath there's this kind of really syncopated bass and drum beat that almost sounds like someone's just taken a bunch of audio and chopped it up and stuck it together to make this groove. And yeah, I don't think I would have come up with that if I wasn't listening to bands like Agent Fresco. There's another band from England called Everything Everything. I don't know if you've come across those guys.
I actually have, yeah, great band.
Yeah, and again, it's all about syncopation and kind of odd rhythms. Not necessarily clever, overly clever for the sake of it rhythms or crazy time signatures. Maybe playing stuff just in 4/4, but with kind of weird and sort of jaunty rhythms that kind of throw it off course.
It's very cool that you list both of those examples, especially the latter example in The Architect, because that's one of my favorite drumming moments on the entire album, is because I love how jaunty it sounds, but it's just like, it's an idea I've never processed in my mind before, being able to hear it's in that time signature, and it works out so very cool, and when people get a chance to hear that, I think they're really going to dig that as well.
Yeah, it's really nice. I do like that bit. I'm quite happy with that bit. It's definitely one of my favourites as well. I think it's because the music is in 4. I think it's the sort of final chorus section, but then underneath the guitars, bass, and drums are all in groupings of 7 to sort of, it's kind of referencing earlier on in the song, the rhythm earlier on in the song, and then it sort of keeps going around until the 2 kind of meet again, until 7 and 4 kind of meet on the downbeat. So that's kind of one of the things that throws it off, I guess, because once the 2 things start off, the sort of melody in 4, which is quite simple, and then this kind of crazy rhythm in 7, they kind of start together, and then they just, branch out to completely separate, parts of, they're going along the same stretch of time, but they kind of feel almost completely separate, and then they sort of meld together once again, and the beat opens up and just plays really straight to kind of release all that tension, which I think is quite nice.
So referencing back into the interview, when you were talking about there was some moments where you simply had to be together in the same room to see if a part was going to work. Was that one of those parts where you had to be in the same room, or was that something that you were able to do through the computer to make it work?
No, that wasn't something we ever really played through that section. We were sort of working on that all the way through the Between the Buried and Me tour. So that would have been back in September, October time, and that song just kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and it almost wouldn't stop. I don't know, it kind of reminds me of, have you ever seen that South Park episode where they have it's like fireworks night or something, there's like a big black snake firework.
Oh, yes.
Growing and destroys the whole town.
Oh, I love that episode.
Kind of reminds me like that. Yeah, it's just this never-ending beast that wouldn't sort of relent. And I think someone just came up with the idea. We sort of reprised this melody from Initiate, the first full song on the album, to kind of finalise the entire song. And then I don't know who it was came up with the idea to bring back the rhythm from one of the verse sections in The Architect earlier in the song, and try and make them sort of marry together. I remember, I think we were in Denmark at the time, and a couple of us just decided to sort of play it a little bit on stage, but I hadn't really come up with that exact beat by then. I was playing something more straight, the kind of more straight version that happens the second time around. But yeah, so much of it is kind of almost written at a computer, and for sections like that, I think it's kind of nice because that's kind of the intention, to make it sound really sort of computerized, as I was saying earlier, like chopping up audio and sticking it together. So it's those sorts of moments that kind of benefit from someone just sitting down and writing it just individually and trying to see if it really works mathematically or harmonically or with another phrase that you're trying to work it with.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, if you guys weren't writing individually, that part might have never happened in the song, and The Architect may not have been the monster epic that it is on the album. Indeed,
yeah. As I said, it kept growing. I mean, it initially started off as like a 4 or 5 minute straight ahead metal song, or at least kind of straight ahead for us. Kind of, if you take the section that starts maybe about a minute or 2 into the song, it's a bit of a down tempo sort of metal song, and then one day Charlie just came up with this crazy sort of 16th note, 10th-y, like horrible melody that kind of, well, I don't know if you can call it a melody, but some kind of riff that opens the song, or at least opens the song after that big intro. And we thought, wow, how are we going to get this to work with the rest of the song? It's almost entirely different, and it's a different tempo. It's just really, really evil and dirty. How's it gonna work? And then we somehow managed to sort of work it in, and then once we did that, we kind of had free rein to develop it later on in the song. So that kind of theme, I guess, comes back later on in the song and gets even more crazy. And we had a lot of fun with it, I think. But it went through several different versions, that song, as a lot of the songs do, really. Some of them, they just work from a really early stage, and we just kind of fine-tune them and try and keep them as simple and stripped down as possible. Some of them sound absolutely nothing like they were intended to at first. So, yeah. Oh, that's so very cool. So, of course, with Affinity not being a full-on concept album, how did the track listing come about to put the songs in the right order for you guys? I guess it kind of all comes down to what energy each song brings, and for some reason early on we kind of felt, once we kind of realised The Architect was going to be such a mammoth song, we kind of thought it'd work really nice bang in the middle. And a lot there's a good few other energetic songs. Initiate, The Endless Knot, Earthrise is pretty upbeat. So it's just a case of spreading those three kind of evenly across. We knew we wanted to start with Initiate. That was the others we weren't so sure about where exactly they fitted. It just took a while to really sort of come up with the right sort of track list that kind of has the right pacing, because the pacing is quite important. You don't want a bunch of fast songs followed by a bunch of slow songs. It just takes a bit of patience, I suppose. Once we've got sort of final ideas of how the songs are going to sound, then we can start thinking about how the album's going to flow and what the track listing is going to be. So it's I guess you've got a little bit more freedom when there's not an out and out sort of explicit concept.
Yeah, very much so. Of course, Affinity has 2 singles that are out so far, Initiate and The Endless Knot. Did you know from the beginning those were the 2 singles that you wanted to promote the album?
I wouldn't say we knew from the beginning, because we started writing Initiate. That was one of the first songs, in fact, that we wrote, if not the first song. And it was, as I was saying earlier about how some songs go through different versions, that was a song that really didn't go through many versions. We had all the sections quite early on, and it was just a case of formulating it in such a way that it flowed. The structure was kind of how he intended it. That was always going to be quite single material, though. I think from the offset, I was quite keen that one didn't wander at all. It was just like a really straight ahead, impactful, energetic, 4 or 5 minute song, no more. So it took a while, because when we had all the original sections, it was more like maybe 6 or 7 minutes. We've still pretty much got all those sections. We've just managed to condense them. And I think it's quite important to have a song, at least 1 or 2 songs like that on an album, because especially at the beginning, you don't want to start with anything too heavy, too full on. It's good to have something that just eases you in and it still gets you quite pumped. I think that's one of those sorts of songs. So yeah, I think we knew early on that was going to be single material, but we didn't know straight away necessarily. And The Endless Knot, again, that's another song, because I wrote most of that song, and that was one that I struggled for a while to cut down as well, because again, I had all these sections. It kind of had a similar life to Initiate. Had most of its sections and form early on. It was just a case of cutting it down so it didn't waffle, and it was just quite. It kind of said all it needed to say in the sort of right amount of time. So it ended up being a little bit longer, but again, we did kind of feel early on that we wanted people to hear that one as soon as possible, because it was quite a new sort of sound for us as well, and quite upbeat, quite energetic, some cool stuff. Cool sections going on, and yeah,
and I definitely think that's 2 great representations of Affinity, and I really hope that listening to those 2 will make people want to listen to the whole album and be able to enjoy it from front to back, because I definitely think it's one of those albums where you have to listen to it from beginning to end, because I always feel that way about the albums that I enjoy the most, being able to listen to them from start to finish and never feeling like I'm gonna get bored of the album or want to listen to something else. Affinity is definitely one of those albums that I can just listen to front to back several times.
Great, yeah. Well, I mean that's good, but also hopefully other people will be able to access it, maybe just for individual songs, because definitely we do write albums to be an album, not to be a few songs followed by a few other kind of songs that perhaps we're not so proud of or whatever, which I guess is probably more popular in the pop, more common in the pop world.
Oh, sure.
But no, I mean, I think aside from wanting to have an album, as you say, with this one, we did definitely want to have maybe 2 or 3 songs on there that you could just sort of hand pick and be able to just kind of listen to in isolation. I think it's good to have that. It also helps for kind of live purposes as well, because you have to, sometimes you have to put together, I don't know, a 45-minute set or even just a 30-minute support set. And in the past, we've managed to fit maybe 2 songs into a support set, and now we're able to fit maybe 6 or 7 songs, which is great, because it means we can give a new audience who might not have heard us loads of new material to listen to, rather than just 2 really big works, which might be a bit more difficult to access.
Oh, that definitely makes a lot of sense, and I didn't mean to take anything away from, like, the singles or anything. I just meant, like, all the songs are so great that I want to be able to listen to them at once rather than just hear a couple and then feel like I need to listen to something else. I mean, with what you guys are doing, it just like everything just feels so fresh and so great on this album. I mean, it doesn't make me want to stop listening to it. And
well, that's great, yeah.
And of course, you made a great segue of what I wanted to talk about. Coming up in September, you guys are making a U.S. appearance, and it'll be my first time seeing you guys at Prog Power USA, and you guys are going to be playing right before the Devin Townsend project. That's going to be a very cool show.
Yeah, can't wait for that. I mean, the first time we were there at Prog Power USA was back in 2011, and that was our very first trip to the US, and it was just a one-off show. So yeah, this time will be great, and we're gonna try and maybe fit it around the US tour. So we'll probably, hopefully, have played maybe a nice handful of shows before we get to Atlanta, which would be great for us anyway. And yeah, I mean, not opening, but playing before Devin will be awesome as well. We played before Devin in Bonn, or kind of near Cologne in Germany last year. It was a show that, well, it was a Dream Theater show with sort of Devin kind of as the main support act, I guess, and then us as the kind of opening band. And yeah, it's crazy. That show was awesome. I mean, it's just a bit of a dream show, really, having a sort of support slot for a Dream Theater show. Yeah,
I was going to say, that's a perfect lineup for me. Dream Theater, Devin, and Haken. I mean, being a prog fan, I would give anything to be able to see that kind of lineup in the United States. But that's the great thing about Prog Power, is being able to see all of these great bands that don't necessarily play the United States that much, being able to have a full headlining time slot. And I'm glad to see that you guys are going to be getting a full headlining slot time for that as well.
Oh yeah, what have we got, 90 minutes?
I think it's about 90 minutes, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that works for us. Yeah, as I said, we can't wait to play there again. It was awesome last time we played. Really, really cool festival. Really well run. Great people. Can't ask for more, really.
Have you guys put any thoughts into what you guys are going to be doing for Prog Power, or is that too early to tell yet?
Well, in terms of you mean like a special show? Because I know a lot of bands kind of do unique shows, don't they? They kind of might do like one of their classic albums or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what set we're going to be playing at this stage, but I would probably say we're not going to do anything out of the ordinary, because we're going to be touring anyway, and we're going to be doing a sort of tour set. So you never know, though. We were sort of toying with the idea of playing the whole of Affinity on this European tour coming up, and then we kind of decided against it. Partly maybe because we start the tour quite soon after the album comes out, and often that it can work. We just kind of felt maybe it might be a bit too much for our fans to hear it so soon all the way through. We prefer to mix it up with other songs. But we might have played all the songs live by the time we get to Atlanta, and then you never know. We could sort of do the whole song, the whole album. I would say that would be the most likely thing. We wouldn't go back to any of the other stuff at this stage, but maybe sometime in the future.
So with playing live, and especially with the new album going to be dropping next Friday, how does it feel playing the older material as it does to playing the material off of Affinity? Is it still feel fresh to you to play?
Oh yeah, totally. It's really fun, and I think we do try and keep it fresh by if we're doing a tour, we try and make sure that we don't necessarily play some of the songs that we played on the previous tour, and try and play some new stuff that perhaps we haven't played in a while. But at the same time, it's nice to have songs to fall back on that we know are really great for us live, and we know that the audience really bounce off live. So it kind of helps. There's certain songs that we know are going to get a great reaction every night. And regardless of, even if we hated the song, it kind of wouldn't matter, because if you've got the right sort of crowd, they help you through it. But luckily for us, I think we all kind of like playing the music that even though some of the music that we wrote years and years ago. And if it sort of ever does come to sort of I don't know, any feelings of maybe not liking particular songs or not enjoying playing particular sections live, then sometimes we mix it up. I mean, I change my drum parts to an extent live, especially with the earlier stuff from Aquarius. I tend to sort of I don't go to town on them, but I change bits of them because I just prefer to play them in different ways nowadays, and I'm a very different player to how I was back then. But then sometimes we add in sections. I remember there was a tour we did a few years ago where we kind of had this Super Mario section that we kind of played in the song Insomnia from Visions.
Oh yeah.
So that was quite fun. So no, we try to keep it fresh, kind of for ourselves, but also fresh for the audience. And there's always kind of songs that we kind of like to fall back on as well. We know the audience are going to love regardless. So.
Oh, very much so. Just getting closer to the end here, I wanted to ask about your setup for what you're currently playing for Affinity. Have you changed your setup much at all between the Mountain and Affinity?
To be honest, no, I haven't. I've generally been playing like a 5-piece drum kit. I guess one thing has changed, and that's that I'm not using a small snare drum anymore. So for the Mountain and for Restoration, I had a little 12-inch snare as a sort of secondary snare to my 14-inch, and I use that for quite sort of poppy, cracky sort of sounds, and upbeat sections in the song Crystallized and in Memoriam and Atlas Stone. Little sections. It's really nice actually to have that little secondary snare, but I didn't use that on Affinity. I didn't really. If I was going to use it, there'd probably only be like a couple of really short sections, and I didn't really feel it was necessary. So I try to keep things quite simple. I think if you kind of listen to bands in the same sort of field as us, generally use. I think most of the drummers generally use bigger kits, but I find bigger kits a little bit overwhelming, and it's partly because I haven't really played them much. I haven't played a bigger kit than a 5-piece since Aquarius, and even then I found it a little bit tricky. I recorded on a 6-piece, but I've always toured on a 5-piece. Having said that, I've currently got a 7-piece kit which I'm considering sort of touring with, but I need to get to grips with it first. And I should mention that actually because it's made by a company called Natal. Have you heard of Natal?
I actually haven't. I'm intrigued by that.
You haven't? So, well, Natal are great. They've actually been around for 30 or 40 years, but they're first and foremost a percussion company. So they make some fantastic congas, bongos, djembes, cajons, all sorts of really nice percussion, and famously apparently used by John Bonham live whenever at Zeppelin shows, as well as I think like Deep Purple shows, like whenever they had percussion. I think Bob Marley's percussionist. So like really sort of classic bands from that era were using Natal percussion, but only in the last 5 or 6 years they've started making drum kits, and they're making waves, I think, because their kits are so great. So I've been in touch with Natal recently, and they've given me this amazing sort of new drum kit that I'm going to take on tour. And so hopefully come September time, I'll be playing a Natal kit there as well. Hopefully I'll be able to use it at the Prog Power USA show. But I know last time they had a house kit, and I don't know how flexible they are with using other kits. But yeah, as you haven't heard of them, I'd definitely check them out. Great thing about them as well is they're actually owned by Marshall Amps.
Really?
Which means they've got brilliant sort of worldwide distribution, because obviously Marshall is such a massive company. Jim Marshall himself was a drummer, which I don't think many people know. So he always wanted to own his own drum company, and he bought Natal. I don't know when he bought it, but yeah. So there you go. There's a little background on Natal. Brilliant, really nice drums.
Oh, very cool. So you say that you currently have a 7-piece. I mean, what is the configuration for that?
Well, that's 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 toms, and then a 22 by 18 kick and a 14 snare. They've also given me another snare, actually. It's a stave snare. I don't know if you're familiar with stave snare drums.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually had the chance to play it yet, but I'm really intrigued to hear how that sounds, because I think their stave snares are quite popular. They've got quite a big range of snare drums, actually. But yeah, I think it's partly because it's such a big kit, but I need to just make sure I'm comfortable playing a setup like that, and that it works with the support acts as well, because changeovers and stage sizes and things like that can be quite tricky. So you need to kind of be quite considered with what kit you take on tour. If it was our own show and we didn't have any support act, then I'd take everything. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be playing that kit on tour. I don't know yet if I'm going to use the full setup or just my usual is 14 snare, 10, 12 toms, 14-inch floor, and then the 22 kick. So quite a standard kind of rock fusion kit.
Definitely a very comfortable kit as well. I love playing those sizes.
Yeah, totally. Actually, another thing about this Natal kit is they've given me some fast toms, so potentially even more room for comfort because you've got the kind of shallower tom sizes, which I'm again really intrigued to hear. I played a few of them down at Natal's HQ, and they sound great. Really punchy toms. So yeah, the fast toms could be a cool addition.
Oh, very much so. So what about your cymbals? Have that changed at all over the last album or two?
So yeah, the cymbals. I don't think I was using my current sort of cymbals back in the mountain, but I definitely was for restoration. So the cymbals that I play are handmade in Turkey by a guy called Mustafa Diril.
Oh yes.
And so I think the Diril family, the kind of legion of Diril cymbal makers in Turkey, are quite renowned. So Mustafa is from that family, but the name that he goes under is Samson, which is where he makes the cymbals in Turkey. So they're perhaps not as big or well known a name, but I have to say the cymbals that they make are they do not compare to any other cymbals I've heard or played. They really are stunning cymbals. I think he takes a lot of care with his cymbals, and he signs each one of them as well, and sort of just notes down the weight as well on the sort of reverse of the bell. And so that's quite nice, a little personal touch. And I get those through a distributor in Germany. But I really like to sing Samson's praises because they're one of those companies that perhaps they're not so well known in the drum world, but they really do make stunning cymbals. So yeah, if they're probably not so easy to get hold of over there. I'm not entirely sure. They might be, but yeah, definitely check them out if you ever see them.
Oh yeah, I've read articles about them, and especially when it comes to cymbals, I'm always interested in trying out all the different brands, and I haven't had a chance to check them out yet, but I've been very curious after hearing so much about them from different drum articles and ads. I think that'd be really cool to check out if I ever get the chance to.
Yeah, I think one of the other nice things about them is they've got their range of cymbals, their standard range of cymbals, but the drummers who use them, they kind of can sort of ask for what they want, if they want like a 15-inch traditional filtered China or something, that perhaps isn't currently in their sort of range. Mustafa will just make one, and I've got him on and the Samson people on Facebook, and I'm just constantly seeing these new creations that he's coming up with. He's just constantly developing his sort of cymbal making and coming up with these really cool looking and hopefully sounding cymbals. So yeah, it's kind of nice because I guess it's the case with most cymbal companies that you never really get the same cymbal twice, but it's definitely the case with these guys is that they really make such a all sorts of different things, and I'm sure they all sound completely different, which is quite nice. Having that kind of that kind of mix of sounds.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's definitely true of the snare, and it's definitely true of cymbals where a drummer wants to have their own identity with their sound. So, especially when it comes to cymbals, being able to have your own identity with each cymbal that's on there, I mean, that's definitely a great way to go.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
All right, well, thank you for taking this amount of time to be able to talk to me and be able to promote the new album Affinity, which comes out next Friday. Again, I can't sing the album praise enough. I just love this album from front to back, and I hope everyone else, when they get a chance to check it out next Friday, will be enjoying it as much as I do. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to bring up that I haven't brought up yet?
I don't think so. Oh, I haven't mentioned. There's this other little company actually called. Do you know Sympads?
Yes.
I've been using Sympads as well for a couple of years. I first discovered them when we were playing in Switzerland and in a small club. And these guys in Switzerland, every time we go there, their techs are amazing. Once I played there and I smashed through a bass drum head in the middle of the Cockroach King.
Oh.
And within about 2 minutes, one of the techs was there with a brand new kick drum head, like a really expensive one, like a 50 quid kick drum head or something. Mm-hmm. And then I turned it over, and I managed to turn it around in about 5 minutes, which I was quite surprised about. But yeah, they're brilliant. One day, the first time we played there, they were like, "Oh, your cymbals are way too loud." And then they brought up these sim pads, and I was like, what the hell are these? And I put them on and couldn't believe sort of the effect they have. They managed to sort of maintain the sound of the cymbal, but make it so easy to control for the front of house engineer, compared to, you know, if you're just using standard felts. So I don't know if any of your listeners or readers haven't come across sim pads, definitely check them out. I mean, aside from the kind of control ones that they use, what are they called? They're not called control, they're called modifiers. They've also got their kind of standard equivalent to felts, which supposedly supposed to allow the cymbal to move far freer and sing out. Whereas with usual traditional felts, you don't quite get that, because they're quite hard and they don't really allow the cymbal to move and breathe as freely as it would. So yeah, I've just been sort of sent a whole bunch of new sim pads, which is quite cool. Really nice little product, and they do make quite a big difference when you consider, especially because I use so many different cymbals and different types of cymbal. So yeah, to anyone kind of listening or reading, I'd definitely recommend checking those guys out, the sim pad stuff.
With those sim pads, I'm very intrigued with this with my own stuff. Do you notice a feel difference at all? Because I mean, if it takes the cymbal volume away, I know sometimes the drummer's initial reaction is to play that cymbal harder so they're able to hear it. Have you noticed a difference at all with that?
I don't think so, because you don't lose any of the attack anyway. You don't have trouble hearing the cymbals, I don't think. In fact, what's actually really nice about them is quite the opposite. It means you can actually hear your drums a lot better, because the cymbals, the types of cymbals that I tend to use are very washy anyway, and they're very sustained. And just having that little bit of control over them in smaller venues where, you know, the sound is just so what's the word? It's sort of closed in, and it's, you know, when you're playing in a small venue, and we don't have much sound on stage because we use amp simulators and we use in-ears now, so pretty much the main sound on stage is drums. And these modifiers from SimPad, they have a really great effect, because they bring, as you say, they kind of bring the volume, or at least they bring loads of the overtones down from the cymbals. You can still hear the attack, and you can hear that they're there, but you can actually hear your drums a lot clearer, which is really nice for me, because I'm so used to kind of almost struggling to hear my drums, because the cymbals are just constantly washing and sustaining over the sound. So I think if you're using these sim pads and you find the right balance for which size modifier works for which cymbal, it's just a case of trial and error really, to find which one feels best to play, which one kind of allows the cymbal to ring out without sort of killing the sound, because they make lots of different sizes, so it's just a case of playing around and seeing which one works. But they are brilliant. They've got so many benefits.
I definitely think you got me sold on this, because I've been definitely looking for that with my own drum playing when I get to play an acoustic kit, because I've always noticed the cymbals just have that high end that doesn't really wash out right away, and it takes the drum sound away. So I've always been looking for something to be able to help let the drum sing over the cymbals again and keep it in natural setting, and it definitely sounds like SimPad's doing it the right way.
Absolutely, yeah. And supposedly as well, they're supposed to kind of almost increase the life of your cymbals as well, but because of the way that they kind of react to the cymbal and the way they kind of let the cymbal sit on it more freely and more naturally, it just means the cymbal's under less strain. So it's in theory it's supposed to last longer, your cymbal, and be less likely to develop any cracks if you're quite a hard hitter. And I crack my cymbals fairly often. So these definitely reduce that probability, which is nice.
No, it's funny you say that, because when you said that you broke your bass drum head that one show, I immediately thought in my head that it was during Cockroach King. I mean, is that is that a song where you tend to play harder overall?
Perhaps, yeah. Definitely the opening. The opening is one of those really sort of ballsy moments in the set. And the other thing that kind of helps, perhaps, is I've got a click track that we all listen to now, and I've also recorded and programmed my own voice counting in to the songs, and depending on the kind of energy of the song, my voice has been, I've recorded it in a different way. So for the Cockroach King, I'm just more or less screaming in a 4 count before the song, which gets everyone pumped. Whereas, if we've got the click track for a song like Deathless, maybe, which is a really chilled song, then it would just be a really chilled recording of me counting in 4. So it eliminates, me having to count anyone in live and making sure we start in the right place. But it also helps get everyone pumped for the kind of tempo or the energy that we're going to be playing at. But I would say as well, another great thing, which I wasn't using on that tour when I went through the bass drum head, is one of those Thalam slam things.
Oh yes.
They're pretty much indestructible. So if you've got one of those on your bass drum, you should be pretty safe. I'm never ever gonna go on a tour now and not have one of those on my bass drum, because it turned out fine in the end. The crowd were great about it, and it was almost like nothing happened, and the techs were brilliant. But going for a bass drum in the middle of the song is not really what you want to do in a set. So try and avoid that if you can.
Yeah, definitely. Since the bass drum is one of the hardest to be able to take the head off and put it back on, and it does kind of kill the set when you're not able to get that changed out in time. So yeah, getting the flam on the bass drum head, I mean, it is pretty indestructible. I've been using one pretty much my entire drumming career, and it's been a lifesaver in so many situations.
Yeah, I've had to put one on my electric drum kit now as well, because I've put a hole in my electric bass drum, which I didn't even realise was possible until I did it. So I'm using one of those on there now, which I should have put on a long time ago, and then it would have avoided having a big sort of cave. But it's okay, it's fine, it works.
Oh yeah, I mean, as long as it still works. I mean, I just recently, because I'm now living in an apartment, so I don't get to play my acoustic kit as much as I would love to be able to, so having the electric kit right next to my recording office, I mean, it's definitely a great way to still be able to keep my chops up.
Totally, yeah. Can't recommend electric kits enough. If you've got the money, definitely get an electric kit. They're brilliant.
Oh, very much so. So once again, thank you for taking now over an hour to be able to talk to me about everything with Haken, everything with your drumming, and of course the brand new Haken album Affinity, which comes out next Friday.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. It's been a good chat.
Oh, very much so.